was made, and we were organized, and we have sent 2 colleagues to the field to just establish a desk, registration desk, and for the coming 3 weeks, actually, we have worked really hard. Well, of course, the last earthquake really also impacted us. We reflected our performance to the field in one side, but we were quite behind of what is needed. So I would say that yes, there are different opportunities of a disaster. It's really important to know how to respond to all these. Preparation as well is really important, and as well resilience. I think that we also need to focus on the term resilience. So we're not actually focusing on intervening on the disaster, but also we focus on preventing the disasters. When we think of a city, when we think of even the companies or individuals, well, I would say that it is actually quite a large context. So disasters and large crises. So this is our context. Sometimes they talk about some opposite concepts, the emergency intervention. Or minorizing risks, cannot be just think of as the opposite of one another, because when we just think of large events in case of a drought, or maybe just maybe a migration of people, I believe that yes, it can really foster a capacity, and a city should be prepared for this. And if there are enough opportunities, the city can really handle this disaster. In Turkey, while in both of the big earthquakes, even we couldn't handle the actually emergent intervention, because even if you can just bring all the international tools, you still cannot really handle that pain, and that was what had happened in the last earthquake. That actually desperate situation. Yes, we felt it as volunteers while we were there. And it's not something that we desire actually for the emergency intervention, because you have to be actually cool while just working there. And this is all about the resilience of the organization. It is not independent of creating an awareness and conscience. So we should ask the question of how to position the emergency and disaster interpreters institution. So I think that maybe right after sharing this, we can just elaborate on that, why the questions, maybe afterwards. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I hope you hear me fine. Thank you for giving us this opportunity in this session. Turgay, you inspired me, because I think that we all as individuals in urban life, yes, we actually invade a space. We have a profession, we have roles, so we just contribute to the actually social flow, and as well we have our own duties and tasks within the family and within the society. So I just would like to relate this with interpreting. Just think of yourself in a community, in a city such as Istanbul that should be ready for an earthquake, or in a country such as Turkey is not very well prepared actually to the disasters. Well, I think that each individual should just think of the personal intervention in case of emergency. And as well, everyone should have a plan in the cases of responding to the disasters. It requires, of course, a training, and by the way, adults, of course, have the responsibility feeling. And in 1999, back then, we have realized the gaps And we got a responsibility. That was the feeling that we had, and it has never changed. So we have not been the member of this association as a hobby. So in 1999, Istanbul University and professors of Istanbul University are the fundamentals of this association, and we lost, by the way, our students. So. Uh, so Marmara earthquake was close to us, and we questioned ourselves about what to do and how. So Istanbul was not impacted by the earthquake of 1999. So we started questioning what could we do, and the tour guy who is our actually founder initiated all these talks. We are interpreters. We are English professors. We teach English, German. We teach how to actually translate. So we are actually doing this as a job. So we managed to go somehow. Some people couldn't go, so it wasn't a role that was attached to us. I felt that responsibility, and I really wanted to be part of that, because otherwise I would have maybe felt guilty. So this is just like an adulthood feeling, I would say. Now, let me just relate it with interpretation. My distinguished colleague is a sign actual interpreter, and also, by chance, right now, our simultaneous interpreters are our actually ex-students, and now they do interpret this meeting simultaneously. So here we have in such a nice environment. We do observe. We are not always in such a sterile actually environments, such elite environments. So I remember that in the past, in 1999, it was the initiation of all. It was the sector was not very mature, and I remember that I moved from Ankara, the capital, to Istanbul. So of course we had certain expectations, some fears, and of course some excitement. And I was working as an academic in the university. I am still. And I was supposed to work in a department of translation and interpretation. It was quite a new department, and I was really scared. And by the way, community interpretation it was a really a new concept back then. But there are also other actually types of interpretation, such as the court interpreting, for example, or migration interpreting. So just think of it, it is a humanitarian crisis, and suddenly you might just face the situation that you do not have enough interpreters, and any people who can speak a language can act as an interpreter, and on that regard. So this is how we have started actually organized right after the earthquake. We didn't have time to think, so I don't think that there are some similar experiences in other countries. And actually, our colleagues in academic life, actually, they many times just told us that it is actually an issue that should be studied, because we have just established that model out of nothing, from scratch. So we signed a protocol afterwards, and we became the defender of the civil society. And Translation Association is actually civil society organization, and this is what we do. It is one of our hats, of course. This is also the case for others. We can be mothers, we can be a member of an NGO, we also just can be like a neighbor. So we all have different duties and tasks in life. So our actual duty was not limited to that. right after me, Rana Kahraman also will talk about the organization structure, because there is a department of assigning the duties. Well, very slowly we have started. Yes, in conference interpretation, there are different types, such as protocol interpreting, booth interpreting, consecutive interpreting. In the interpretation that requires interpretation in the disasters also actually requires such definitions and descriptions and sub-descriptions. Yes, the job is done actually in front of the research and rescue actually teams. But it requires some descriptions. You can work in an airport, you can work in the city center. You need to actually communicate with all the parties. Sometimes you interpret on a phone, sometimes you inform the parties. Of course, some duties are being limited. However, you just keep working on the realms, within the realms, and so you just try to understand how to improve and when and how. How can we make the conference interpreting better? How can we improve it? And also, how can we improve the conditions of the sign interpreters and also migrant interpreters? So I believe that, especially for disaster interpreting, I think that the disaster and emergency itself, the interpreters are going to be the victims of the earthquake in case of an Istanbul earthquake. So in such a case, actually we need interpreters that are living in other cities, so that they can come and they can help. We need to just establish such a structure that we need interpreters who live in other cities, and they can rapidly can come and help. Well, I'll give the floor to Rana. We have a central organization. We have a critic actually in the last 23 years. There's no hierarchy among us, but we want actually young people to join more, so that we can be retired with the contribution and the participation of young people. We have a center, we have a field, we also actually do practices on the field. We actually do all the enforcement and operation on the field. The organization should look young, be young, so we actually try a different civil society modeling among us. 23 years ago, when first we started, we really wanted it to be visible. We took some important actually steps together with AFAD, with the Disaster and Emergency Management Presidency. We signed a protocol. So in case of a disaster, without turning into a crisis, this structure should keep functioning. So in 2021, a protocol was signed by the parties. Close relationship and contact, of course, is something that gives us a sustainability and resilience. Actually, it is a good model because when we just think of the official institutions and the transformation of the official institutions, we shouldn't ignore it. We have to follow it, and we need to use as well international literature, so that I believe that we can become resilient. This is how we have actually progressed. My apologies to our interpreters because we talk too fast. So the worst speaker can be maybe interpreters. Anyways, it's a joke. One earthquake and Marash earthquake, these two important big earthquakes, it just helped us to establish this relationship in between the local parties, institutions, and as well with international institutions. When we think of all the field operations and the practices, yes, we did the facilitation, because facilitation, becoming or being a facilitator was our most important actually actually task. And as Mr. Turgay has said, the earthquake of one actually somehow led us to work according to a certain plan. So we knew how to act. We already were trained actually about how to act during an earthquake. We had a plan, a roadmap, an organization, so that we could really achieve all our objectives and purposes. So who will come, when, how? These were the questions that we have asked. Of course, there are also the needs on the areas, and how would we just go as interpreters to the locations. These were all different questions that we have asked. And by the way, we have a short-term and long-term trainings. These trainings are about the behaviors and as well the basic principles of interpreters, and we also have some tools that we use as part of this training. And also we have daily workshops. We even organize actually online workshops even. So I would say that Marash earthquake, as the recent and the latest earthquake, was an earthquake that we started working on even on the very first moment. And we very quickly got organized, and during the crisis actually conditions, we responded to the needs starting from the very first moment, and we were in the very middle of the crisis, and we had to do the actually crisis management because the need was just really huge. And by the way, I would like to underline the local, because we needed to actually look towards the local. We needed to think how to cover all these needs locally, because it was required for the sustainability of the organization and operation. So that was our purpose and aim. So we were in Adana and Antep cities. We had our bases very close to the airports, and Hatay, Marash, and Adıyaman were other cities that we covered as the organization. There were some coordination centers, and we were coordinating with them. And Istanbul, of course, cannot be ignored. Istanbul Airport and Istanbul City were the destinations that we were there physically. So from center to the local, we have established a coordination. So we always were in contact with the local. So this is what we expect for future, for a possible future Istanbul earthquake. İzmir, Çanakkale, these are the other cities that as well that are hosting actually our interpreters. We also have international contacts. So altogether, we try to get prepared for a possible Istanbul earthquake. Because maybe our talent and our capacity wouldn't be enough, and maybe we would need actually some external power and support from other cities and even from other countries. And so I'll give the floor to Turgay.
Ondan sonra soru cevap şeklinde gitmek daha iyi olur herhalde.
First of all, when it comes to responding to crises, coming back to that context, why, even though we're talking about arch, we are not part of a functioning system? First of all, in terms of the logic of intervening, responding to a crisis, the communication between languages and parties. The teams who are in charge of implementing that are not fully knowing or perceiving that. This is work that is unique, and it requires different approach. I was welcoming the foreign teams at the Adana airport and giving them interpreters. On the first night, we were under great pressure. I won't go into details of it, but there were close to 9,000 foreign staff coming in, probably more, but only 3,000 or 4,000 were actually useful. The professional teams do not want an interpreter. They say, we know what to do. We go to the rubble, or if they're a medical team, we go to our own unit and we continue working. Those who contact us probably speak a language. They're not fully sure, but half the teams that we talked to said it would be helpful if you give us interpreters. But there is a difference of perception. Communication is very important in international disaster aid. The organizations and responders and the international units have a lack of awareness about the significance of communication, which is one of the significant points when we talk about resilience. Why did we position ourselves at airports? Because it won't be possible after the team goes to the rubble. It would be like finding your way out of a jungle. We call this international disaster aid. There's protocols, organizational infrastructure, but none of them work smoothly. In terms of Turkey, for foreign teams to work or enter the country, there needs to be a central decision and they must be given a permission and allowance. But on the other hand, after a certain point, everyone starts coming in. And we couldn't manage that either. We really could not. Even teams which would do more harm than good were able to act freely in the field. When we stepped in, I'm not saying this to praise ourselves, but rather to convey the essence of the problem. People who know disaster management, who could communicate with those people, know the structure and establish the communication. Having such a person present is immensely important, but even we were not fully aware of that. So the Maraş earthquake taught us a lot. And when something like this happens, communication, not only between different languages, but also parties, nations, or agencies. Managing that efficiently is very significant, as we always claimed in theory, but in our plans or trainings we do remind this, but we had the chance to witness firsthand that it could be so vital and create such an impact. Sometimes certain responses or interventions were done or not done because of a person or because of an institution. If we are aware of this, which we have been mentioning for a long time, it should first be nationalized. It should be strengthened at a national level. Then, at the international level, it should be raised and followed up. I wanted to underline the significance of that. We didn't go into too much detail. This is just a frame. But if there are more questions, we can go into more details accordingly. Thank you very much for all the information. I work in the field on migration as a communications expert. I have experienced some of the problems that you have mentioned during my career. As I was working in the field, I noticed it being ignored. Psychosocial resilience and well-being afterwards, for your personal well-being, what kind of measures do you take? Because on the one hand, after the Maraş earthquake, different volunteers went to the field and I received personal feedback how unprepared they were, how inexperienced, how not resilient. And as they are trying to help, they may harm their personal well-being, because not everybody is cut for the field. Even though I may want to work personally, I know that it won't make me feel good, so I don't go to the field. I don't attempt to go to the field. What about you, your members or interpreters that you assign? How do you ensure their psychological well-being? Are you a psychologist? No, I'm a communication expert. Maybe I can talk about its place in training, then Rana could elaborate in terms of communication with the field. We have this chapter in our training, post-trauma stress management, inside first aid training as well. We mentioned it briefly in our one-day training, and in longer training, it's a module with an expert facilitating. We are aware of the significance of it, and without accumulating problems throughout the day, maybe through debriefs or WhatsApp groups, but whether it's migration or disaster response, it is needed because the psychosocial aspect is stronger compared to other types of community interpreting. You are between parties which are not asymmetrical in power in a hospital or in a courthouse. One person is affected by the crisis and has a trauma, and the other party is providing services. So in terms of discourse, you must set up a balance between the two parties. At the interpreting, we emphasize this as well. Why is a community interpreter different than other types? Because they're under pressure, and the parties do not have equal power. For instance, between the doctor and patient, how should the interpreter act to establish good communication? Or between an immigrant and a migration officer? Or with a person who lost a family member, between him and the foreign aid worker. So, cultural differences, and deepened by the crisis, the emergency situation, urgent situation, and the challenges that it gives us. As we all said, the interpreter is a facilitator or a mediator, and in the good scenario, they must be trained previously, or if not possible, they were given an orientation in the field. Many of our volunteers get a brief in the field and get help through WhatsApp groups during the day, so that they're given a frame. So that unity has a very positive impact, and there are newcomers, there are many interpreters, and how do the newcomers cope, and how the more experienced ones help them. I will add one sentence only, taking one step back. When we make a call for training, we don't say, let everyone come. We say, measure yourself first and know what you're putting yourself into. When we're making a call for the field, for volunteers, at the beginning, when we communicate, when we contact volunteers, we give them a list of materials. Do you own these, or do you physically have them? Then we give them the field conditions that they are going into. You're going into such conditions, and under such conditions, can you maintain yourself for a certain number of days? Check yourself first. If you find yourself ready, then you can proceed to the field. There is such a brief, and after checking for that preparedness, we offer them to the field. After they go to the field, during the day, a few times throughout, we call certain regions so that we can check their well-being. The third or fourth day in the field, for instance, or the fifth day, we sometimes call them back because they will be retired and they'll be running on the adrenaline only. So we ask them to stay no more than a week. After they come back, we carried out supervision sessions guided by an expert. It was a debrief, a voluntary debrief. If if they wanted to participate or share, we enabled online support for them so that it is more accessible. So we do have this awareness. As Professor Alev Bulut said, in immigration and other related areas, we know how sensitive the spiritual well-being, psychological well-being is in terms of resilience and preparedness. We were aware of this since the very beginning. I would like to add one point. Usually it's not a problem to find interpreters at a disaster. It is usually the case. We coordinated only 1/5 of the interpreters in the field. But there's one thing that we ignore. Someone witnessing this for the first time in their life, when they go with the team, they don't have self-measurement or any support. So previous training is a must, we believe. In this earthquake, we coordinated 300 interpreters. Half of them, or maybe more, were not trained, were unprepared. But we were aware of this problem, and to compensate, we utilized mechanisms. For every incoming team, we gave a briefing, which was significant. We did not send anyone to the fields very quickly. We had 300 people in our own network. With other organizations, we could reach almost 1,000 people. But how many of them were actually ready for the field? But we had an accident as well. We sent an application form to our own network, but a few hours later it was leaked to the internet, and 8,000 people applied in total. We looked through them as well, but that's not it. We hear a lot. We were criticized or even cursed. You make us fill a form, but you don't respond. And on social media, there were discussions. People are dying, but you are still choosing people, choosing interpreters, or giving conditions, requiring conditions. That is very, very dangerous unawareness. These are actually smart people in other walks of life. But when it comes to disaster or disaster response, they have never thought before, so they're just responding with their emotions at that time. With the list of 8,000 people, we could have flooded the field with interpreters, but we did not do that. What we did extra was, as our colleagues were running into new interpreters in the field, we asked them to communicate them, support them, include them in our network. These are all about psychological support. One of the most important things is the problem of managing the psychology. You have that duty as well, because as the team is working, you are the one who's in contact with the local people. You could be blamed or lynched. Maybe it's a miracle that nothing has happened to you, because people have family members under the rubble. And a few people come for search and rescue. Everybody's trying to pull them in different directions. You have to manage the situation. If these people did not have an organization behind them, they would collapse. What is actually done at the rubble is crisis management. None of the response resources are sufficient, and the interpreter is trying to manage the crisis. There's also the benefit, correct me if I'm wrong, during the earthquake, we had to draw support from the local as well. In addition to the interpreters that we sent from the center, people who are earthquake victims themselves applied to us as well. With a briefing on the phone, a resilience support was offered to them. The list of 8,000 had many applications from the local. We looked at whether they had any previous training, where they live, do they have somewhere to stay, do they have a family that they need to take care of, because you contact such people that they say, I can leave my family in the tent between certain hours and go to the field for help. So by managing it well, by respecting the trauma that they're experiencing, but on the other hand, it is a very important tool or instrument that they could feel can help. So during that trauma, especially if some interpreters, some volunteers had significant experiences, it is also a facilitating factor to help them get out of it. So it turns into a crisis coping instrument. So when it is functioned or managed well, the local participators can feel helpful, they can feel that they're contributing, and when necessary, they're supported by the center. So we have experienced such a process as well. So the local is very valuable for us now, and easily accessible. They were the ones that were easily accessible or convertible. We were in the fields with a colleague, interpreter colleague. Were there any sign language applicants? Because we could not reach all 11 provinces. We did our best, but 1 week, for instance, you said 1 week. For 17 days, I could not leave the region since the first day. For instance, one interpreter had to go from Marash to there, so there were fewer of us compared to other languages. Among the applications to you, can I ask you questions?
Where did you interpret exactly in the disaster region? Well, we were on the field actually. In between the directorates, in the administration as well, departments, in hospitals, and also there were deaf people, and so we interpreted for them. And also in aid distribution, hospital processes, tent distribution, and as well hearing devices distribution, and as well for the ones that are waiting for the wreck. Well, you're saying that waiting for the wreck. Did you interpret in front of the wreck for the people that are waiting in front of the wreck? Yes, there was no electricity actually in the first days, so there was no communication as well in between the ones that are actually in the wreck and outside. So we did not have such an experience. So we were there without any experience, to be frank. So that was an important actually experience. Our situation was as such. There were, for example, families with hearing challenges and difficulties, and we actually wanted to see if there were any family with such a situation that are under maybe the wrecks or ruins. We sometimes, they just leave the wrecks. These actually rescue teams, if they don't hear any sound back, and they cannot communicate. Their Turkish as well was really limited. And by the way, actually, people just think that people just will write on the paper and they would understand you. However, it's not working in that way. So that's why there were many challenges. We did our best to help it out. By the way, our families are also having hearing challenges. Generally, actually, the children of such families are also having inheriting such health problem. That's why, yes, we can lead the process, but in other cities, actually, it is a problem all. Just don't think in the concept of earthquake, but if they are to go to hospital or if there are some other type of disasters, could there be an opportunity that maybe sign interpreters can help out? Well, why not? It is a great opportunity. We have received also such demands. And by the way, we have academic colleagues. I always shared this information with them because they have a connection with the federation. So it's actually out of our duty definition. So it is actually mostly on their duty definition. So that was actually a cooperation in between the associations. So Çevir and also Istanbul Guides Association were some other institutions that we have collaborated, and there were many more actually associations. So that's why it's really important to actually lead the demands to the actually to the experts. We can do maybe future cooperation. I would say that disaster interpreting is just like a general title. Emergency and disaster interpreters can work in actually different areas and fields. In case of emergency and a disaster, even there are people in actually a more of a disadvantageous positions. So you are the response to your own question. In 1999, actually we had to establish that organization. So as CODA, and as well as the children of such a family who's having some hearing challenges, then you can start it, you can initiate it. And I'm sure that, yes, there are federations, but they don't really cover this specific area, the sign interpretation for the disasters or for emergencies. Yes, maybe you should think of or create maybe a system for this because, my colleagues, they also don't know how to do it exactly very well. So you can, for example, start a group. You can just create maybe a WhatsApp group, because I believe that you are the leader. You shouldn't wait for others to lead you. You are the leaders yourself. Yes, of course, we are open for cooperation. As Rana has said, it is beyond our actually job duty. However, we are open to cooperation. We support actually foreign teams on the field. This is what we do exactly. If one of the, for example, foreign teams only just speak via the maybe signs, only then it can be part of our actually duty definition. So we have a list, and sign interpretation is not part of it. It's not part of it. So I believe that the main issue here. It is also another need. I would say that the disaster victims cannot communicate, and sign interpretation is just a very visible part of it. It is a large area. We have never been part of it yet, but we are aware of the situation, and we can think what to do and how to do. We can just think it together, I believe. I would say that in each region there are other actual language requirements. For one earthquake, for example, we needed a Kurdish-speaking interpreter, especially about logistics. Yes, we needed a Kurdish interpreter. So that's why I would say that there are different needs and requirements of each occasion. So there are the victims. they also have such a need of communication, especially immigrants, immigrants that are living in Turkey but cannot speak Turkish. Well, we have experienced it a lot actually in the last earthquake. So it should be covered by the local people, but they can be in contact with our organization. We are open for cooperation. We can develop many ideas. We can actually plant the seeds. Well, yes, we might maybe recommend actually our sources of interpretation. I think that we have a lot of common points. Our actual training and education program can be shared with you. By the way, there is already a project in Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. There is a program just to cover the need of the interpreters, cover it locally. Are you talking about city council? No, it's not. I think the name of the program is it is your budget, bütçe senin. This is the name of the program. Actually, it was selected as the best for program, I believe, ranked as the fourth. So. Especially when you think Istanbul earthquake, it is going to be an earthquake in which we won't have the capacity of receiving aid. Unfortunately, intervening would be very, very challenging. So that's why we need local organizations. We need to think flexible. Resilience is in parallel to flexible thinking. Also, as the emergency and disaster interpreters, well, we actively actually work in the first 15 days. And then there comes the medical teams, humanitarian aid teams, especially in Maraş earthquake. Well, we have completed the first phase, and now we are in the second phase. And also there are socio-psychological support systems, and all these processes are very well ongoing, and just shows and proves that earthquake actually requires a long-term planning. It's not something like short-term. There is a continuous need. So that's why psychological support services, Miss Alev and as well the associations of interpreters collaborated with Turkish Red Crescent and as well the General Directorate of Migration. Yes. However, if it is actually a crisis that is caused by humans, such as the massive migration, and then actually the victims are the interpreters. They are the victim of the disaster, and they are the interpreters at the same time. So they have to be trained so that they can be actually damaged in a minimum level. They shouldn't experience the trauma. They should be more resistant and resilient, and so that they can really provide a better service for their actually people. So just don't think it as a natural disaster. So just don't think that it is only an earthquake, but there are many types of disasters. We are now living in such a world that it is impacted by the climate change. So each actually society are just facing different type of disasters, such as war, such as massive migration. We will be experiencing it more and more. So that's why we need actually a larger, on that regard, I believe, umbrella to cover different types of disasters, either human-made or nature-made. Community interpreting. It is serving to your own community. Just being an individual, a leader who would serve to your own community. So it's not about actually having an education or a training and then serving to your own community, but it is actually directly serving to your own little community. A person who can speak the language can serve to their own community. They can be an actually intermediator of the communication. So actually, it is it is interpreters that are not really interpreters. So yes. Yeah, this is an interpretation service, and when we just think of this social collaboration and a cooperation and a solidarity, yes, there are a lot to do. For example, refugees in Istanbul, we know that there are many people from different countries. So the ones who can speak, for example, good French or English or Turkish, they can be selected and they can be trained so that they can serve to their own communities. There is no limit actually to improve the quality. There is only a financial limit, I believe. The countries need international funds and donations, and this is really important for, I believe, we need international aid, so we need such efforts of the EU and the UN, because it comes from west to east. And by the way, we also, as country, help out many other countries, but it's all about budget and fund and financial means, and it is limitless. It is limitless. It's really important to just think about how you manage your actually sources, how you manage your people. So we have different roles as people. It is really important to organize yourself while carrying out your own duties. You know, you just need to just plan your time, your personal life. It is about budget and welfare also. It's limitless. And our topic is human being. We can say a lot of things, but if we have any other question, we can receive more questions, please. Thank you. Microphone, please. Speaker is inaudible, unfortunately. Microphone is off. Well, there are two main actually themes, agendas. One of them is the local potential interpreters and their training, and collaborating with as well the other parties. We can also support, by the way, local administrations if they're volunteering to do it, and sharing this duty with an international organization. And the second thing is IRC, Emergency and Disaster Interpreters. Well, our accreditation process is, well, it started a year ago. What we should do, just preparing the accreditation plan for this. We couldn't finalize it, But we have to actually cover some gaps. It's not a rigid accreditation system. It should work and function during an emergency and a disaster. But it should at the same time work smoothly. Well, for search and rescue teams, it might be easier, and also there is a higher actually life risk. It is also the case for interpreters. You have to first protect yourself during the disasters. However, for example, we are not allowed to enter into the wreck. Into the ruins. So within the framework of our institution, it is forbidden. But there might be some conditions that this person can make their own decisions. We cannot stop it. So we have some norms that our interpreters should follow about accreditation related to your question. I would like to say that community interpreting it's not something should be done by educated people. If there is a need, it can be done by any. However, still there is a quality problem. There is this potential of damaging or being less effective. So these are the risks. So it should be supported, it should be supported, and also the organization actually should give a formation. Should give training. So I just would say that emergency and disaster interpreters team is very, very successful. Of course, we are not. We are. I cannot say that we are very well accomplished yet. We are good. We did a lot. We can manage volunteers, but still, of course, there are gaps. How did we do it? ARC. There are 15 people actually in the Department of Volunteers, volunteer actually assignment. They only did volunteers assignment during the earthquake, and then we have realized that this number is not enough, and we have to increase actually the number to 30. So in the coming actually days, this is what we are planning. So that's why, while defining the system of collaboration and cooperation, we also should pay attention to such details. In our organization, there are a lot of professional interpreters. It's an advantage. And they can be in the administration, but being an interpreter is as well priority for us. However, for the second circle, they don't have to be interpreters, but they should be prepared for the disasters. They should be trained about disasters. And they should not have to actually have some certain behaviors during the disasters and emergencies. I think that this is a really important question, I believe. Hello, my name is Furkan. I also studied translation and interpretation. I worked in the Union of Municipalities, and as well I worked in a UN project in Kenya. So that's why the interpretation dimension and the localization dimension of this session are quite actually related to me. So my question is the relationship of IRC with the local managements and the local administrations. What you have done until now and in the coming days are planning to include more the municipalities and the local administrations. What would you say? Were they helping out you, or they were just stopping you, blocking your work maybe? As we do international actually aid coordination, this is how we have started. In the past, we did not have such a chance of working with the local administrations, and I think that this is a gap. However, in this earthquake, I think 6 people from Istanbul municipality, from the Department of International Relations. Well, they actually came to our center and they coordinated the work with us. They helped us. So they also understood that the training and formation are required. So MOC is something that we remember and understand. MOC is the disaster volunteers of the neighborhood. This is what we say MOC as MOC. So we need motivation and energy. In a case of an emergency, yes, you are suddenly energized, actually. You are suddenly motivated. Normally, if you do a call, no one answers to you. But now, right after an earthquake or a disaster, actually, people become more responsive and alerted, and they want to be part of the process and an organization. So we need actually an extended organization. Izmir is an example for this. On Saturday, we will train our volunteers in Izmir city. We expect the demands of other cities because without the demand coming from the field, we cannot do much. I have a comment, especially during the disasters. Actually, we also collaborate with the university students, the volunteers. There are universities in which there is a translation department, so they were also very excited actually right after we put contact with them. Well, we had a lot of actually colleagues, friends called Furkan and also Mohammed, My name is also Mohammed, my first name. Okay, great. We had so many actually volunteers whose names were Furkan and Mohammed from Anatolian universities, from local universities. So anyways, I think that the local potential is very important. So in each city, there are universities. In some of them, there is this Department of Translation and Interpretation. So universities can form, for example, some clubs, or they can invite us and we can go and explain to them what we do. Also, hopefully, our cooperation with Istanbul municipality would be more mature and it will be advanced. So we also, simultaneously have to integrate all this work into the academic life because we are all academicians. So that's why we need this cooperation and collaboration in between the academia and the local administrations. When we just think of the students, they're not totally a volunteer or they're not totally a professional. They're not resilient enough. So we just need to just teach them, give them a little bit of everything, all these three capabilities, so that, in case of an emergency, they can go and work. Because otherwise they would just go back, with the first bus. They will go back to their own hometowns. I have another question, if possible. Local administrations and international relations departments. I observe that slowly the number of the interpreters actually it is increasing. Yes, that's true. Our actually students, graduates, they have started working for the municipalities. True. So I just think of the Union of Municipalities, and I'm just thinking of the local administrations. So when we, could they cooperate with Çevbir? Is it possible? Yes, it's just a step. So MAC is working with the neighborhood units. We call them muhtars. So this relationship is very, very important. We all live in a neighborhood, in a district. So for our own security, it is required. If I'm a doctor, for example, I first just should support my own apartment and then my own neighborhood. So this is the way of getting organized. So in ARC, yes, we are taking one step forward via the protocols. By signing protocols, we just create crisis centers so that we can actually get support. And we should have accreditation to work with the international teams. Gaining volunteers is another issue. This is what you're saying. It is a different, actually, way of connecting. We should do it. It's a great tip, by the way. That's true. In municipalities, yes, there are more and more interpreters working. It is good. In AFAD, there is also interpreters staff. I was thinking that maybe our graduates would be leaders in AFAD. That was actually my hope years ago, because Turkey is a country of earthquakes. However, they disappeared, unfortunately, within years. So volunteering is a different concept, I understand. So our interpreters that used to work in AFAD, Disaster and Emergency Management Presidency, they no longer work actually in AFAD. Yes, there was such an intention, but it is very limited. Even the ones who used to work as interpreters, they become very passive. So what we thought was people who would know the international relations, the language, the situation, so that we can be integrated with the public, because we cannot actually own the responsibility and role of the state, but sometimes this is the expectation. In one earthquake, for example, they wanted to replace us with the state, but we didn't admit it, because we have to just limit our responsibility. This is what we should be doing. So while I was on the field, when I'm on the field, what we do is not a typical interpretation. It's just like running from one side to another side. It is facilitating the life, the work, but it's really important to be careful. We are not decision makers. We shouldn't go beyond the limits. There are actually some blockages, maybe. We see the blockages, and what we do is just communication support. We cannot make decisions. Sometimes it is easy to actually go beyond over this, especially interpreters are not professionals. Non-professionals can really just go over the limits. It is really important to be really careful on this. So we need to just create some pools, and we should partially send people to the field so that we can actually somehow solve all the problems. Otherwise, actually, there would be many problems.
Maalesef alamadık.
We couldn't get that result from AFAD, but local administrations seem to have a better potential in that regard. I think we should emphasize. We cannot coordinate everything, or we don't have to be the monopoly when it comes to disaster interpreting in Turkey. We cannot cope with that, because for that we would have to stop doing everything else. And we are only a pool of volunteers. We don't have any other resource. There are two types of cooperation here. First, people who work in those institutions can come join ARCH, but still be efficient and in their own institutions, and take the personal decision to go to the field, and they can decide what to do when something happens. But we expect them to do this by sharing information, by informing us first. Secondly, there could be a local initiative, just like Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. We do cooperation, we give support, but we don't take responsibility. They have the responsibility, but we cooperate when an incident happens. So we update our plans based on these options. Sharing training, sharing information, or cooperation. We could have such contributions as well. In that regard, municipality interpreters or institution interpreters, out of those who are interested in disaster, could have a network. It could be UMKE interpreters as well. For instance, those who are already interpreters in their institution or who are interested in this because they have a knowledge of terminology. Maybe we could help with training them or being in contact with them. In preparedness before the disaster, we could establish closer connection. There could be such a transfer of model. Everyone could be autonomous, but at least we know each other and we know what to do when a disaster happens. My name is Mehmet Özgaras. I come from Konya municipality. I'm an interpreter there. You have answered many of my questions, but one thing that I'm confused about. During the earthquake, I was a student, and when the earthquake happened, I had just started working as an interpreter at the municipality at the Maraş earthquake. So I have some questions about the academic aspect, but I want to add I have personally experienced what you said about AFAD. Even though I was an interpreter at the municipality, I was involved in their functioning, in their mechanisms. So I experienced the same process with AFAD as well. I think in terms of status, to go to the upper status, you take exam. There are people who want to be more than interpreters, so they enter some exams because when you become a specialist, you have better rights. So there is that problem as well. During the earthquake, many students, including myself, I remember at the form that came from Arch, I saw the following question. No matter how proficient you are, for those who have hesitations about it, is there a quick starting guide or terminology for such people? You mean in the field? We have field material, which includes terminology as well. Thank you. Secondly, how should the academia and civil society share roles? The community interpreting courses are offered in many departments, but when it comes to disaster interpreting, should it be included in the curriculum, or should civil NGOs like you play a role? How should students be trained? Because it's an emergency situation. When it is needed, they're not ready because it's a very big resource. So is it the academia's responsibility? Thank you. That's a good question. Because I believe that things should be included in the curriculum, but then there's a break with the NGO, civil society, so who should have which responsibility? In many university meetings, we hear this. How can we include this in our curriculum? My personal opinion is, even if others don't agree with me, as a person who lectures on this, yes, we should mention this within a course. But it's a voluntary formation still. It should not be subject to scoring or grading, because it should be voluntary in nature. When it turns into a club activity, it is based on voluntarism. After we start seeing positive examples of this, yes, it will take form. There have been such attempts in the past, student clubs. Some made significant progress, but after graduation, once they enter their daily hurdles, since they have already taken their score at that course, for them that information is entirely lost. It's just exam material, and it becomes lost resource. So I think it should not be part of the curriculum as type of community interpreting, because we're not talking about a specialization here. We're talking more about gaining know-how and experience and being present in the field with that. So you're asking about terminology in the field. Yes, there has been for a long time. We prepared it at the beginning, then AFAD prepared one, which again was improved with students of translation studies. It is now available in 18 languages, and it was actively experienced at the Morocco earthquake. So there are such glossaries, but I'm against it. Education is a must, but I'm against it being an element, a component in curriculum. I think it is a type of community interpreting which should not be reciprocal. Yes, it should be taken as a context within community interpreting. For instance, more contexts are better, like a courthouse context or hospital or a disaster and emergency situation. It should not be a vocation, but a voluntary, unless you're employed at Red Crescent or UMKE or Immigration Office directly. Unless you're directly employed this way, even if you are a institution's interpreter, we have you. So as a sub-context, it should be taught quite well during the community interpreting course. How should the interpreter act, etc. But there are NGOs who specialize on this, and if you'd like to do more training in your student club or be a volunteer after you graduate, you can join, you can equip yourself with better certificates or trainings. So graduation should not be a guarantee of that volunteerism. It should not be something that you forget after you graduate. If you feel a need for this, just like the sign language colleagues, it's in their lives. If you have internalized it this much, it will be fine. It's not something that can be acquired by a simple diploma. You should continue your links, or you should be a representative of it in your institution. I agree with you. You can teach interpreting very well, and then teach what a disaster interpreter does, how different it is than conference interpreting or consecutive interpreting. When volunteers come to us, we encourage them to improve their skills or give them some basic skills. The school is where you gain the basic skills. Those are the main modules. Those, I believe, should be taught at school. I agree, but I would like to make a significant addition. At the current situation, when this becomes a special profession, training requirements may change, so that in that case we may have to approach separately. But we have 8 minutes. Maybe we can take 1 or 2 more questions, so I'll be very brief. Lifelong learning, I think, should be the focus, not solving everything during bachelor's degree or associate training. The fundamentals should be taught there, but then with other modules, other additions, it could be improved. Municipalities, if there are more people interested in this in municipalities, there could be more demand, and in order to respond to that demand, there could be some attempts of education. One short addition: during the earthquake, after the earthquake, after the first or second day, we noticed that English was no longer needed for no longer applications for English. Where did you receive it from? For the Marash earthquake. Which source from? We did not make any such announcement. In terms of volunteering overall, no English interpreters needed anymore. No, that's wrong. That's what I wanted to ask. from Mexico, Japan, Greece. There were different teams. So is there an imbalance between the need and human resource? Who needs what and where and how to meet that need? I don't think there was any other structure who was planning it like we did. Sometimes they were instantaneous or sometimes without thinking. On the website of our association, you can see some numerical data. It's a broad topic. The assignment processes of Arch. There was an Alexa incident, for instance, which was noteworthy. Everybody's trying to find an interpreter and send, but when it comes to how to manage it or how to run it without any plan, without any know-how, only with instantaneous decisions, it should not be done. I believe there are people in the field who experience problems. Any other person who would like to take the floor? We have 6 minutes left. Yes, İlknur Hanım. I see a potential for becoming a vocation. There are 2-year disaster management programs. I know many people who have registered in those programs. Maybe there could be such a course needed in this, or if there was a 2-year department for disaster interpreting for people who would like to be trained in this area, why not train such people? It could be a profession as well, but I'm curious about what you think. Maybe I can say the following. In the vocational adequacy institution, we are members of different commissions with colleagues from different universities. Emergency interpreting or disaster interpreting is a subtitle in line with the lifelong learning projects. It was prepared with the ministry. There are certificates prepared with the Ministry of Labor. Community interpreting is one title under interpreter requirements, interpreter qualification. Maybe one day it will be published and there will be exams. You can be a graduate of any department from any school, but lifelong learning is a principle of Europe and popularized. When you apply for such certificates, you can be approved and receive a certificate from the professional adequacy institution. So in that case, since you're proving your proficiency, then it's technically a profession. With a school diploma, maybe, I don't know, maybe 2-year technical schools, I trust them more, 2-year technical training programs inside a technical topic, or even maybe at vocational high school with electric and electronic, teaching them terms seem more relevant to me, or a vocational translation, maybe without needing a 4-year degree for such community assignments. I think it could be more helpful. Thank you. Our last 3 minutes. Maybe we should go back to the main topic. As crises increase and as the climate crisis is the biggest threat that is nearing, it brings with it different crises, migration, conflicts, etc. So we are entering a tunnel of crises. I believe many circles think the same. So one of the ways to cope with it is international cooperation and disaster help. Climate crisis is not something that a country can deal within its own borders. Risk Society is a book by a German sociologist, Becker. At the beginning of the century, with the technology, progress, modernization, certain balances, the idea that certain balances could be established and maintained, that perception is over, which means in the issue of crises, international relations and disaster help should function in a stronger way. Even today, international, we're not able to talk about self-functioning mechanisms. There is UN, European Union, a civil protection mechanism, but even those are not fully mature or reflected in the field or in training. I'm not talking about interpreting, but when international relations are strengthened in order to ensure source efficiency, I think there will be a communication, interpreting aspect as well. So we should also improve our perspective, and maybe crisis interpreting rather than disaster interpreting could be the thing that we have to fulfill. We have such a desire to do this as well. Yes, we have to transform and change because international systems require evolving into that. The Marmara Forum, our presence in the Marmara Forum is a sign that we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Well, this actually meeting is a little bit different for us. Right after the last earthquake, we have made a lot of presentations. For the first time, actually, we did participate to Maruf. Well, we think that it should be a little bit different than our previous, conferences, meetings. The general actually title of Maruf is resilience, but it is also really important for us to just relate it with the disaster interpreting. It is, I believe, an important reference here. Well, yes, we have been working for the last 13 years. However, we are still quite a marginal and innovative group. We started 23 years ago, but still, actually, we support progress. We are quite innovative. Why do I say so? Because we don't have any similar institution in Turkey, and also we we are not working actually in an institutionalized environment. So that's why maybe platforms like that can maybe bring a benefit on that. We can create some general perspectives. We have been established after the earthquake, and we were focusing on the research and investigation and rescue. It might